It's been a tough run of play for the Lightning over the last couple of weeks, but is the toughest stretch of their schedule over? We'll break all that down and grade the goalies and the overall offensive and defensive units when we return here on Locked On Lightning.
You're Locked On Lightning, your daily podcast on the Tampa Bay Lightning, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Josh Sperber, thanking all of you for tuning into Locked On Lightning and making Locked On Lightning your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And if your team is the Tampa Bay Lightning, then this is the show for you. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase on the Game Time app. What time is it? Game time. And no games today for the Lightning, but the Bolts are getting ready for a showdown tomorrow against the Chicago Blackhawks, starting their last road back-to-back of the month. And that will be game number 12 in the month of January on January 24th. So the Lightning playing 16 games in the 31 days of January, which begs the question, is this the toughest stretch of the schedule over the Lightning season? So far, yes, this is the most games that they've played in the month, and they've had a lot of battles against not just difficult teams, but difficult teams in the division of the Tampa Bay Lightning. So to this point, this has definitely been the toughest stretch of schedule. I mean, the Lightning have not had days like this where Wednesday and today, the last 2 days were one of two pairs of days in a row that the Lightning will have off this month. After the game against the Red Wings, the Lightning have two more games off before they return home to play the Chicago Blackhawks. But other than that, it is just a night off and then a game every other day this month. February's schedule a little bit easier with the All-Star break. The Lightning working out to get 2 weeks between games after the All-Star break in Montreal for a game on February the 9th, and they return home on February the 23rd for a date with the Seattle Kraken. And then it goes to March, where I actually think the Lightning's toughest stretch of the schedule is, because it's very similarly structured to this month of February, with the Lightning playing another stretch of 16 games in the month of March in those 31 days. Two back-to-backs, no more than two days off in a row. Pretty much every other day is a game, and this month of March is loaded with some key games, like 2 games against the Bruins, 1 against the Panthers and Capitals on the road after just 1 day off. And right after that Panthers game is the Columbus Blue Jackets at home on March the 4th. So, you know, the Lightning have their road trip. I think the teams that they played in January might be a little bit tougher than the ones that they are going to play later on in March. But I think just because it's that much later in the season, March is going to be the Lightning's most difficult month, not just because of the fact that it's another month with pretty much a game every other day, but it's towards the end of the season when those games just simply mean a lot more. So having that difficult stretch, playing almost every day, playing every other day in the month of March after they've already done it, hopefully will be a little bit easier. Hopefully they'll have gotten used to the extra wear and tear on the body by that point, but it's certainly not going to be easy to do when it comes to crunch time like it will in March. But I mean, I think the Lightning really handled this month of January decently well. I mean, you know, there are a couple of points left on the table here and there. Certainly the road games haven't gone to plan. The Lightning have won all 4 games at Amalie Arena so far in the month of January, but have only won 1 game away from Amalie Arena. That was the 5-2 win against Pittsburgh last Sunday. Other than that, the Lightning have just been beaten on the road, and in a lot of those games, they're games that looked like they were in the Lightning's hands earlier on. The Lightning have now slipped into an under 500 record on the road, 10-12-2. and they've now lost their last 2 games, still with a goal differential of plus 36, though, which is third in the NHL. So I think the road games are something that the Lightning definitely need to improve on. Playing away from Amalie Arena, playing away from your home arena, no matter which team you are, is always going to be a little bit more difficult. The Lightning have such a great home ice advantage that it just seems like their play has dropped off that much more because they don't have that fan support behind them. But the Lightning, with some more home games in the month of March, that is going to make that a little bit easier. And against most of their tougher opponents, they'll be playing them at home, with the exception of the first 2 games of the month in Washington and in Florida. But the Lightning have a really solid slate of teams that, on paper, it looks like they should beat at home in the month of March. Columbus, Buffalo, Boston, which is obviously going to be a huge game, Pittsburgh, Utah, and the Islanders are the Lightning's 7 home games in the month of March, while they will play 8 times on the road, with key dates including those against the Stars, Panthers, Bruins, and Capitals, in reverse order, actually, now that I am thinking of it. But I think this was definitely, at this point in the season, the Lightning haven't had a tougher stretch of the schedule. And when it comes to just, days back to back, the amount of times on the road, going from a road back to back to another road back to back in a different part of the country, it's just not easy. But these games, I think, are all better spaced out. There's only one back to back, and it's from going from a road game against Florida to a home game against Columbus. Other than that, the Lightning don't play consecutive days in the month of March. So I think just with the amount of days packed together in that way, in the fact that the Lightning have just not had a lot of rest, had to deal with a little bit more injuries this month because of just the shorter time between games. In that way, I think January was the toughest stretch of schedule they'll face all season. But I think it's just a different kind of tough that goes into the schedule when you cross 2 more months and go from January to March, because in March, that is when, things need to happen. It's do or die time. And for the Lightning, that is in reference to qualifying for a playoff spot, because they'll, try to lock that up in the month of March before the season ends midway through April. But just because of the weight of those games, how much more those means that much closer to playoff time, I think that it's the toughest and definitely the most important stretch of the schedule in March. But in terms of just back-to-back days, game after game after game, not a lot of rest, especially with the amount of injuries that the Lightning are dealing with. They just face the toughest stretch of their schedule. And another difficult part from that tough stretch, an injury to Eric Cernak. Cernak is hopefully going to go away, as Max Crozier was once again sent down to AHL Syracuse. This has already happened this week, though, where Crozier went up and back. The Lightning certainly hoping that Cernak can suit up against the Blackhawks on Friday, when the Lightning take on Chicago for the first of 2 times in the span of about a week. So in 4 days after Friday's game, the Lightning host the Chicago Blackhawks at Amalie Arena, which I'll be able to report on from our X account on LO_Lightning, as I will be at that game. Make sure to follow us on X at LO_Lightning for Lightning content, updates, and news as well. You can also give us a like, a follow, and a subscribe on whichever channel you watched or listened to this podcast on. But the Lightning are out of the kind of the midway point of the season. I think after this back to back, it simplifies a little bit with 2 days off before 2 more days at home. So the Lightning get to come home after Saturday's game against Detroit. That's certainly going to help. But I think you just want to see, the only thing that you just want to see more of is just winning on the road, closing games. Because even John Cooper was talking about the end of the Canadiens game. It was another one of those games the Lightning played well, just things didn't go their way. And that's really how most of these losses seem to happen. The Lightning were playing solid on defense against San Jose and LA. They were leading for points of the game against Toronto, against Montreal, against the Devils. I mean, the Lightning had their chances to not be undefeated this month, but pretty darn close to it. And that's something that you definitely like to see an improvement in as the season progresses and we get closer to playoff time. Still one more batch of mid-season grades we have to go through, though. The goalies, Jonas Johansson and Andrei Vasilevsky, will be graded on their half-season performance so far, and then we'll get into the overall grades of the offense and defense units here on Locked On Lightning. From the first whistle to the final drive, FanDuel makes the NFL playoffs even more exciting because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win your first bet. That's $300 to keep the action going. And the FanDuel app is very easy to navigate. The variety of bets keep every game exciting. Plus, when you win, you get paid instantly, which means no waiting around for your winnings. Whether you're betting on your favorite team like the Lightning or just looking to add some extra excitement to the playoffs, FanDuel has you covered. So just visit FanDuel.com to join today and get started with $300 in bonus bets. That is FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Last round of midseason grades. Mostly good for the Lightning's offense and defense. And now we've got Andrei Vasilevsky and Jonas Johansson to grade. So far, Johansson has played 36 games this season. Vasilevsky has played in 36 games this season. Johansson in 11 with 10 starts. JoJo is 5-4-1. Vasilevsky is 20-14-2. And let's get started with Andrei Vasilevsky, who is in just about every metric this season, a top 10 goalie. The milestones have been the most impressive part of his season, skated in his 500th career game and also won his 300th career game in record time. His 490th game between the pipes for the Tampa Bay Lightning. Andrei Vasilevsky won his 300th career game, the only goalie in NHL history to do so before reaching 500 games played, passing some absolute legends. Guys like Jacques Plante of the Montreal Canadiens, really the who's who of great NHL goalies. He also has won 20 or more games for 10 seasons in a row, joining the likes of Marty Turco, Martin Brodeur, and Ed Balfour, and so many other great goalies who have had the same kind of success that Vasilevsky's done. And the Lightning, I don't think, would be in the position they're in without Vasilevsky. He has made some great saves. The Lightning have won a pretty solid number of games that they have been outshot by a wide margin. I mean, you see Vasilevsky standing on his head for a couple games, making 30 plus, almost 40 saves in multiple affairs. And the majority of time, Vasilevsky has seen 30 or more shots. The Lightning have won the game. So he has kept Lightning in a lot of games that they maybe shouldn't have been in, and certainly helped the Lightning stay in games where they were getting dominated on on all sides of the ring. But Vasilevsky, I think his expectations kind of skew the grades I can really give him, because I expected Vasilevsky to be a Vezina Trophy winner. And with the way Connor Hellebuyck is playing for the Winnipeg Jets right now, I just don't think that's going to happen anymore. So that's the only things that I'm really seeing when it comes to lowering his grade, because objectively, if you look at Vazzy's stats, they are solid. 20 wins, a total of 16 losses, with 14 of them in regulation, 2 shutouts, goals allowed average of .237, which is 7th in the league, and a save percentage at 8th in the league of .915. Really solid numbers, but you just expected a little bit more from Vasilevsky. I don't think that most of the goals let in are really his fault, but there are definitely some games where you expect a little bit more from him, I think. But again, I just don't know if he's really the guy to be pointing fingers at. Nikita Kucherov himself said that Vasilevsky was the Lightning's best player this season. That's not a sentiment I agree with. I think Kucherov is certainly one of those guys, maybe even Brandon Hagel. But Vasilevsky has been great. I think that he can still take it up an extra notch, and maybe it is just waiting on the playoffs for that to happen. But I'm going to give Vasilevsky an A-. You just want to see a couple more wins. There's certainly some games in there where, the defense wasn't at its best, or even Vasilevsky let up a couple. He was subbed out of only one of the 36 games that he played in. couple things to just, make himself look a little bit more like the Vezina Trophy winner that he is. But yeah, I think a very high A minus or the lowest or low A for Andrei Vasilevskiy, but he did provide the Lightning with some of the best moments in the beginning of the season, over the course of the season so far. And Jonas Johansson has really stepped up well in his absence. As I mentioned, the stats don't look great in the limited action. 11 games, 10 starts, 5 wins, 4 losses, 1 loss in overtime. Goals allowed average of 327. Save percentage just under 900. And there are definitely some games that Johansson played out of his mind and the defense just didn't really help him. That certainly being the case against the Maple Leafs. Then there have been some games where where it seemed like Johansson's presence in net was not helping the Lightning, and they would have been better off with a different goalie. And Vasilevskiy, I think, is a really underrated backup, a good veteran player, and just a really a really solid backup goaltender. But he doesn't do anything exceptional. He does everything well. He does everything well enough to be a pro, but there's nothing that really jumps off the page with him. That being said, he has beaten a couple of really solid teams over this season with the Lightning. He's a guy who knows his role very well. Obviously, playing behind Vasilevskiy, there's only a certain amount of a chance that you're going to end up getting. But some of the teams that he has beaten, New Jersey on the road, the Panthers on the road, just a bunch of really tough games on the road. 2 really big wins, about half his wins are about what you would expect from the Lightning, just teams that you'd be better with on paper. But again, Johansson, he's been solid as a backup, but just hasn't showed me, anything exceptional or anything that is really, needle pushing as a backup goalie. So I'll give him a B minus, C plus. Definitely spelled Vasilevskiy in some back-to-backs. And the most important thing about the goaltenders is that they've both been healthy. The Lightning waited until, I believe, late November, early December last year to get their starting goalie Vasilevskiy in net. And it's one of the reasons that they kind of limped into the playoffs at the end there. And this year they're expecting to just contend for the playoffs with no doubt in mind with a healthy duo of Vasilevskiy and Jonas Johansson. So now we'll do the overall grades for the offense and defense. And Nick Perbitz was talking about the simplicity of the Lightning defense that has made it so successful over the course of the season.
It's just the simplicity that we have this year. We're not trying to do too much most of the time. When we do that, kind of play hockey the right way, and it leads to good results.
And for the most part, that's true. The defense was certainly identified as a weak spot for the Lightning, and it's continued to be that over the course of the season. The Lightning will win the majority of their games in higher scoring affairs. But the offensive rankings for the Lightning always seem to be atop those on defense. For example, they lead the league in goals scored per game. They're 11th in the league in goals allowed per game, 6th in the league in power play percentage, 11th in the league in penalty kill percentage. So there's definitely a disparity between the offense and the defense. The offense, I think, is a pretty easy A plus. I think the only reason it's not an A plus might be because the defense is holding it back a little bit. I'm going to give the defense a B minus to C plus, because there have definitely been some games that the defense has cost the Lightning. And offensively, there are even the games that they're not scoring a lot of goals, it's games where the goalkeeper's standing on their head, and the Lightning have still, recorded 30 shots or 40 shots or something like that. The offense usually shows up. Sometimes the pucks don't fall in the net, but if there have been any 50-50 games that haven't gone the Lightning's way, it's been because of defensive mistakes. Defensive mistakes just cost the Lightning a divisional game against the Canadiens, and now moved the Canadiens up a little bit closer to them in the standings and in the playoff position. And there have been a few games that we can go back to and point fingers at the defense for why the Lightning lost those games. So their grades can have to be a little bit lower. B minus, C plus for the defense, A for the offense. For the goalies overall, I'll give a B plus, A minus, leaning towards an A minus, because Vasilevskiy might not be having his best season, but average season for Vasilevskiy is a legendary season for most other goalies in the NHL. But again, you just expect a little bit more from him. The offense gets an A grade. The defense, a little C plus, B minus in the middle of there. And next up is the playoff push for the Tampa Bay Lightning. All-Star break is in about a month for 4 nations. And now the Lightning need to hold on in a much, much closer Atlantic division than it seemed to be shaping up to be at the start of the season. I love going to live events, whether it's sports, music, theater, or comedy. One of my favorite memories was attending a Rays game last year towards the end of the season, and the energy, excitement were just unforgettable. And now Game Time has made it even easier to get tickets for your favorite events with their new feature, Game Time Picks. This feature filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Recently, I was looking for tickets to an upcoming concert using the Game Time app. With Game Time Picks, I found amazing deals and could even see the view from my seat before buying. The Super Deal was particularly impressive, offering great seats at unbeatable prices. Plus, the app's all-in pricing shows the total cost up front, with no surprise fees at checkout. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply, but again, you create an account and use the code LOCKEDONNHL, LOCKEDONNHL, for $20 off, and download Game Time today. What time is it? Game Time. One last segment today, and we're talking about the Lightning's playoff push. The Tampa Bay Lightning have started to shed some of their games in hand, now only 2 games back of the majority of their division. Lightning have still played the fewest games in the Atlantic Division and tied for the fewest in the entire NHL at 46. But the rest of the division is really started to come up, and I still don't. It changes how I think everyone really thought of the Atlantic Division before the season. On Locked On NHL, we did a squad show with the Atlantic Division teams, and it seemed like everyone thought the Lightning would be the first team to drop out from what's really been the big 4 in the Atlantic of the Maple Leafs, Panthers, Lightning, and Bruins. The Lightning defied all expectations after Steven Stamkos left. Jake Gensel has continued to emerge as one of the stars in the game of NHL and still one of the best players in America, as he was selected for the 4 Nations roster for the United States as well. He filled in for Stamkos nicely, and the Lightning have kept themselves in the thick of the playoff race, currently at 3rd, 1 point with a game in hand ahead of the Senators and Canadiens, who are both tied at 52 points in 4th place. Senators, though, have the slight advantage. They are 4th, Canadiens are 5th. The Bruins have really begun their drop-off. They had the first major move of the regular season, firing their coach back in, I believe, November, but a long enough time that it was early in the season. And the Bruins had kind of hung with it, but now that, you know, the staggered schedule, the teams with games in hand are starting to get things balanced back out. The Bruins were one of the teams who had played more games than the entirety of the division for the better part of the last couple of months. Now they've dropped to 6th, still at those 52 points, but with 1 game more than the Senators and Canadiens. The Red Wings and Sabres are still hanging around. Red Wings have had some nice runs of late, but are still on the outside looking in. The Sabres in 8th place seem to be in a distant last, 11 points behind the 4th place Ottawa Senators, but there's still time to change things up. However, I think that right now, if you look at the standings in the Atlantic Division, that is how I think the playoffs are going to shape up in the Atlantic. The Maple Leafs, Panthers, Lightning, and Senators. I think the Senators have a really solid roster and some good young players that have turned them into a surprise team and a really formidable force. Of course, you know, they made some moves this offseason to try and move the needle and really push themselves over the edge in terms of contending with the rest of their division. And in a lot of ways, it works. Are they going to be, you know, a dark horse? Are they going to be a team that you're worried about in the postseason? No, I don't think so. But I think they'll be a wild card team because I just don't see the Bruins really putting it all back together. And I think the Red Wings could do it. I think if there's any other team that's out like if you look at the Senators, the Canadiens, and the Red Wings, they can all challenge for that 4th spot. But I really think that the Tampa Bay Lightning have all but locked up their playoff position. It seems like the top 2 are entrenched. Florida and Toronto are going to stay at 2-1, I believe, as the season ends. I just don't see an Atlantic Division team catching Toronto in the regular season. I just think they've been that good. The Panthers they're still, I think, could finish a step ahead of the Lightning. I think if the Lightning can move up, they can overtake the Panthers. Right now, they're 6 points and 2 games behind Florida, who has played 48 to the Bolts 46, with 2 games split between the Lightning and Panthers of the 4 they'll be playing. And the Lightning really have a chance to give themselves a leg up over Florida with those 2 more games later in the season. One of those is on the road in March. That is certainly going to be a big one. The Lightning, by the way, have 2 contests at the beginning of February coming up on the 4th and 6th that we'll be keeping our eyes on for sure. But in March, close to the end of the season, and then a home game, the last home game of the season against the Florida Panthers is certainly going to be a fun one. And that, we might see a game between 2 teams in the playoffs resting some of their guys. We could see the Lightning trying to move up 1 more spot, because I think that's going to be really close. I don't think that you're going to have the Maple Leafs or the Panthers run away with the division, because I think when you look at the Lightning, they haven't stacked up against Toronto this season. The Leafs have gotten the better of them all 3 times they have faced. The same has been the case with the Canadiens, who have beaten the Lightning twice. And those division losses certainly hurt the Bolts, but I think the Lightning are definitely good enough at home that gives them an edge over just about anyone. They're one of the best home teams in the league, and you just expect them. If you're going into a Lightning game at Amalie Arena, you expect the Lightning to win. Not because of it. It's not just because of the fact that their team is as good as it is. It's because that they're that good at home. They have a great fan base, and they just love playing at Amalie Arena, and it usually ends out well for the Tampa Bay Lightning, and it certainly has for the majority of the season this year at 15-6-1, the second most home wins in their division and the fewest home losses in the Atlantic Division as well. So, the Lightning there's certainly a chance that some of these other younger teams can come take over the Lightning spot right now. I'm kind of banking on, the youth and the inexperience, and the Canadians with a bunch of new players in that, with some injuries kind of slowing Patrick Laine's adjustment to Montreal. I think the Lightning just have that much more experience, so they can keep ahead of Ottawa, keep ahead of Montreal, Boston, Detroit, with the exception of the Bruins, who are all younger teams, looking to really make a name for himself. And, the Canadians are honestly the scariest team to me right now, just because they've beaten the Lightning twice. And if it ends up close to in a tie, the Lightning could potentially drop out of the wild card spot if the Canadians can really get a second half surge going, which it really seemed to start when Patrick Laine came back in December. But, the Lightning still have the advantage. They still have a couple more games to play than the rest of their stadium, but I think they're going to serve in a playoff spot. I think they're going to finish 3rd in that Atlantic Division. I do think they're definitely going to challenge the Panthers for 2nd. I think that the Maple Leafs are going to win the division, not running away, but I definitely see just the standings kind of stay as they are right now. The Canadiens might leap atop of the Senators. They're playing really well right now, but I just think the Senators are better built for a playoff run than the Habs right now. And I think the Bruins, treading water without their head coach, without the regular head coach, that's just a recipe for disaster. And at some point, the bottom's just going to fall out. But the Lightning might be in good shape, but they still have a lot of work to do to try and hold that playoff spot. Hopefully they'll get Eric Chernak back tomorrow against Chicago. We'll have some updates on that as soon as we can get it. But I want to thank you for tuning in once again and making Locked On Lightning your first listen today. Now for your second listen, make sure to check out Locked On Fantasy Hockey. Become the fantasy hockey expert, and get the edge over your league mates with daily tips from Steel and Flip. Find Locked On Fantasy Hockey on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. And on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast, please make sure to give us a like, a follow, a subscribe, even comment some fun, friendly stuff if you so choose. We really appreciate you guys listening to the podcast every day, and we certainly appreciate your support because we do this show for you guys, the fans. So thank you for being fans. Thank you for tuning in and watching Locked On Lightning. And we've got a couple games to preview on tomorrow's show. Until then, thanks for watching. Have a great day and go Bolts.